I just, I know that as a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that we don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends. But it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist.
When last we checked in on The View, Whoopi Goldberg was defaming a woman who ran a bakery by saying that they were racist or sexist or maybe just MAGA. Let's just leave it at that. She got into a lot of hot water by claiming that this bakery on Staten Island wouldn't make her favorite cupcakes. Good God, what world are we living in right now? Because of her politics. Well, it turns out it was a lie. And the Staten Island borough president, as well as this woman who owns this bakery, who has been in her family for like over 150 years, they spoke out against it. And hopefully they're going to be suing ABC News, The View, Whoopi Goldberg, and just throw Disney and the whole Mickey Mouse crew in with the lawsuit while you're at it. Well, Whoopi's been a little chagrined. She's been taking a back seat there on The View and allowing Sonny Hostin to do the anti-American rants. And yesterday was no exception.
A new article in the Wall Street Journal claims that the shift to the right in this election reveals that Americans view themselves as belonging to a particular economic class more than their race and gender. And Bill Maher said it's not the only thing Democrats got wrong. Take a look.
Someone must tell the usual suspects on the far left that the saying is, when you're in a hole, stop digging. You just lost a crazy contest to an actual crazy person. What a shocker that the people who see everything through the lens of race and sex see their election loss as a result of racism and sexism. Yes, if only we weren't so irredeemably unenlightened, we would have elected a black president by now. Oh, what, we did? Asked if racism is built into our society. White progressives agreed with that at higher levels than black and Hispanic people. They don't want your pity. And black people can't afford to indulge rich white people's need to endlessly flagellate themselves. They just want prices to go down and good jobs and the police when you call them.
Well, if he's right, then why didn't people vote for the former prosecutor who actually had policy plans to help the working class? I mean, again, I got my popcorn. I don't know why people did what they did. I see all these reasons. And so, okay, time will tell. But what do y'all think?
I just, I know that as a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that we don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends. But it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And, the facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at there's a clear racial divide in who voted for Trump as opposed to who voted for Kamala Harris.
All right, so we're going to pause here. We're going to let Sonny continue with her anti-American, racist, and sexist tirade here. But she wanted to bring data to the equation with a visual aid. She brought a graph to explain the racism and the sexism in this country. So let's take a look at her data for a second, because if you actually use your brain for a second and actually logically think these numbers through, you will see that it does definitely tell a story about racial bias and maybe even racial discrimination and bigotry in this country, but it's not exactly the story that Sonny Hostin is telling. So let's go from the bottom up here. I don't know what other is, so set other aside for a second. But other went 54% to 42% for Donald Trump. Okay, Asian, 54% to 39% for Kamala Harris, okay? So about a 15% swing of Asian Americans. Hispanic Latino Americans, a little bit closer. 52% of Hispanic Latino Americans went for Kamala Harris, while 46% went for Donald Trump. Let's skip black voters for a second and let's go up to white voters. White voters went 57% for Donald Trump, 41% for Kamala Harris. Again, that's about a 16% swing. That's about the same swing as Asian Americans and a little bit bigger than the swing of Hispanic Americans, right? So, okay, whites go for about 15, 16% for Donald Trump. These other ethnic groups, Asian, Latino, go 15, maybe about 13% for Kamala Harris, right? So now let's look at black voters. Black voters went 85% for Kamala Harris and 13% for Donald Trump. Now, if you're Sonny Hostin and you see that 85% of black Americans voted for the black candidate and only 13% voted for the white candidate, and then you look at white voters, and white voters, 57% went for Trump, but 41% went for Kamala Harris. You look at that and you say, aha, you see, whites are racist. They wouldn't vote for the black person. I look at that and I say, whoa, 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 wait a minute here. 41% of white people voted for the black woman. And only 13% of black people voted for the white guy. Now, if you're using this chart to say that we have a racial divide in this country and that race motivates people's thought processes and ideas and how they vote, I think that the clear story from this data that Sonny Hostin herself put in front of us actually shows that black people were motivated by race, not white people. Clearly, that's what these numbers show. Logically, that's the only conclusion you can reach. And again, I don't like thinking in these terms. I don't like thinking black people do this and white people do that. But it's Sonny Hostin who is trying to make this case. She's trying to point to this and say, you see, white people are racist. And apparently, the only thing that would solve this for her, to prove to Sonny Hostin that white people aren't racist, is for the numbers to be exactly the same for white people to overwhelmingly vote for the black candidate, just as black people overwhelmingly. So when black people overwhelmingly vote 85 to 13% for the black candidate instead of the white candidate, they're not being racist. But if white people do the same thing, and to a lesser degree, they are being racist. And the only thing to prove that white people aren't racist is if they do exactly what Sonny Hostin wants them to do. That's what she's saying. And yet the data actually blows her argument apart. In fact, it turns the argument right back on her. But we'll let Sonny continue because she's smarter than all of us.
It's very clear. It's not only clear by race, but it's also clear by education. And so the notion somehow that that is not true, this is by education. Those who attended college voted for her at a higher degree than those that didn't.
But I
and
think
I've
you're
said
missing
that.
his point.
Let me,
Right. Now, listen, say what you will about the attending college questions, although I will point out in here, I would love to see the attended college versus didn't attend college numbers also shot through the prism of union membership and entrepreneurship. Because I would love to see how many of those who either never attended college or attended college but received no degree, how many of them own their own businesses, right? I would love to see how that is reflected in here. I know that's a little nuanced for people like Sonny Hostin. I would also like to see how many children these people have and whether they're married with children and what that does. I would also like to see the never attended college or attended college but received no degree, whether they live in rural areas of this country, right? And maybe even are affected by rural issues and suburban issues versus living in an urban area. That said, I just want you to know, never attended college, 63% to 35% Republican to Democrat, versus advanced degree, 59% to 38% Democrat over Republican. That does tell us hill. It really does. Sonny Hostin would have you say that that means that you're stupid if you vote Republican. I would argue that this has little to do with intelligence as it has to do with education. And please, my friends, don't ever confuse education with intelligence. They are two very, very different things. But I will also say this: advanced degree, bachelor's degree, JD, MA, MBA, MD, PhD. You know, all of those people have two things in common. Well, three things in common, I guess. They vote Democrat as one of them. Number two, they think of themselves as highly educated and therefore highly intelligent. But number three, and probably the most important factor, is they're probably carrying a whole lot of student loan debt. And I happen to know for a fact that one political party has been spending a lot of time over the last several years on the untenable political promise that they would relieve student loan debt. In fact, Joe Biden has unconstitutionally defied a Supreme Court order and relieved a lot of student loan debt for many people in this country. So if you're carrying all that debt with those advanced degrees, it's sort of in your self-interest to continue to vote for the people who will literally write you a check for 30 grand so you don't have to pay that debt back. Maybe this has less to do with how smart you are, and it has a little bit more to do with your own personal self-interest. So you can get bailed out of a really stupid decision you made to laden yourself with debt so you can get advanced women's studies degree and an anthropology minor, and now you've realized that you're qualified to be a barista at a high-end Starbucks.
That is not true. This is by education. Those who attended college voted for her at a higher degree than those that didn't.
But I think
I've
you're
said
missing
that.
his point.
Let me just
Okay.
finish. And so I've said that before, and there was so much backlash because I think it's an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth about
But
this
his
country.
whole point is they did
I just said the people who vote for Trump are stupid, racist, and sexist, and I'm getting backlash for that. I don't know why I would get backlash for saying Trump voters are stupid, racist, and sexist, but I guess it's just uncomfortable for you to hear these things. God, this show can't get taken off the air soon enough, although I don't know what we would do with about a third of our content on this program. So keep going, Sonny.
didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well, then why didn't black people-
we
why didn't
agree or
black people
not
vote
with
for
Donald
him?
Trump's plans,
Black people
they
are
thought that he was
one of the
reflective.
poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny,
I didn't
you're
say the
missing
vast-
it. Most of my
I didn't say
family,
the vast
a lot of my
majority,
family doesn't
Alyssa,
have college
but
degrees.
the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say
They're-
I'm
they're-
white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not what stat. What stat are you talking
Let me
about?
just dissect the
Yes,
two.
you can.
wait,
There's a lot
Hold
more
on,
to this.
hold on.
Let me just-
Calm down. Everybody just take a breath. Take a breath.
Well,
Take a beat.
well, let me jump in here because I think,
Yes.
Sonny, what you say is valid. And I think absolutely that is part of the problem. But when we hang our hat on that's the only problem or
No
the
one's
main,
saying it's the only.
I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying the backlash is that when people hang their hat on that being the only reason, any criticism of Vice President Harris must be because she's a woman or she's black. I voted for, thank you. I voted for Hillary Clinton, not because she was a woman, she was the most qualified. I voted for Vice President Kamala Harris because more of my values fell in line with what she stood for. So all of that can be true. There is something here to the socioeconomic class, though, that is crossing racial divide in academic and education, too. Americans with a college degree 30 years ago were roughly 20% of the population and held the same percentage of household wealth as those without a degree.
Yeah.
30 years later, this is important, Americans with a college degree account for 38% of the population and 73% of the household wealth. The haves and the have-nots have gone so far apart that they are rising up right now, and they cross every line of our democracy.
Okay,
can I?
All right, that's actually a very interesting point that she made. She didn't connect the dots as much as she should have, because also part of that, in terms of how many people in this country had an advanced degree or just a basic bachelor's degree 20, 30 years ago versus now, also tells the tale that these degrees are somewhat meaningless right now. People get degrees because they were sold a bill of goods that if you get a college degree, then everything's going to be set for you and you're going to get a job and you're going to be able to make more money than anybody else. And people are now realizing that that's not true. And so when people have their college degrees, they try to self-validate the poor choices that they've made. And they like to think of themselves as smarter and more educated, when in fact they're not. By the way, one other thing on the racial divide that Sonny Hostin is really, really insistent on, as you saw with her debating her friend Alyssa Farah there. The fact of the matter is the racial divide was tighter here, as Alyssa pointed out, than it ever has been. This whole idea is, well, black people want a better life too, so why didn't they vote that way? it's so disingenuous and such a lie, because the fact of the matter is we know that for the last 40 plus years, the voting trends for Black Americans have been so solidly with Democrats, regardless of who the candidate is, whether the candidate is Black or white or a male or a female. Blacks in this country have voted Democrats, sadly, election after election, because they have been sold a bill of goods by that party. And they have been raised to think, number one, that Republicans are racist, and number two, that they need the Democrats to give them the benefits and the programs. And if the Democrats aren't there in power, then your schools are going to get, completely decimated, and your streets are going to be full of crime and trash. And that, oh, wait a second, these cities that have decimated school systems and who have crime and trash all over the sidewalks are actually run almost 100% by Democrats. So I don't know why they keep buying that story, but that's what they've been told. The fact of the matter is that's not going to get reversed anytime soon. What you do is what Donald Trump has done, which is slowly, election after election, start to build back trust with the Black community and actually build that coalition. Sunny Hostin is saying this because she can see the numbers, actually, the very numbers that she's showing you. And she knows that this election season, more Blacks voted for a Republican than any time in the last 40 years. And that terrifies her. It terrifies all Democrats. And so what do they do when they're scared and they think Republicans are winning? They do what they always do. They call us racist. They call Republicans racist. They call conservatives racist. They call white people racist. They call America racist. It's all they know. It's all they know. But as we show right here, the actual numbers that are supposed to support that hypothesis from Sunny Hostin, that assertion from Sunny Hostin, the actual numbers show the opposite. The actual numbers show that if there is any sort of racial bias in the way people voted this time around, sadly, it appears to be with Black voters. Less so than before, but sadly, that's where it is. For those of us holding our breath for the past several months, we can finally take a big old exhale. What a relief. The election's over. Work can finally be done on the major issues this country is facing, and one of the most significant is our national debt. The fact is our nation is broke, and that debt is a house of cards, and it's not going to be quickly or easily dismantled. So for your own personal finances, the strategy remains the same. Diversify your savings, guys. Many things are out of our control, even out of Trump's control, at least in the outset. It's important to have a safe haven for your savings. So why don't you talk to the people at Birch Gold Group? Birch Gold Group, they'll help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news is this does not cost you a penny out of pocket. Text my name, Larry, to 989898. Get a free info kit on gold. Right now, through Black Friday, you're going to receive a free 1 ounce. I don't know. I assume it's about this big. I think it's actually more about this big. You're going to get a free 1 ounce Silver Eagle. The visual aid really sells it, doesn't it? A free 1 ounce gold Silver Eagle for every $5,000 purchase with Birch Gold. Text Larry to 989898.